Hi. Hey. Hello.
And now, our feature presentation.
It's Sunny, and this is going to be a very special video this time around. For the first time ever on the channel, I'm covering a movie trilogy. Sort of a big deal, isn't it? You know, I usually just cover standalone films, but nah. Let's go crazy today. Also, since this is a trilogy, I'm going to structure this video differently. Instead of the usual aspect by aspect analysis, I'll instead cover each film in this trilogy in its own segment, and give them each their own individual thoughts and analysis, and then sort of round up my conclusive expression by the end. Since this is a very special video, as my first ever series essay if you will, it had to be something special, but I wanted to be unique and choose something not that well known. It's a classic for sure, but one that isn't in the usual public perspective, which is why I landed on well, let's get into why this French trilogy just so happens to be considered one of the greatest movie trilogies ever. I feel like I'm not saying that right. The very making of these three films goes way back to a decade earlier than their initial releases in the 1990s, all back to when director Krzysztof Kieślowski met lawyer Krzysztof Piesowicz while researching for his film No End. The two forged a strong friendship until Kieślowski's untimely death in 1996. No End was also the beginning of a friendship with the eventual composer for the trilogy, Zbigniew Preisner. The trio worked together on Decalogue, a collection of 10-hour-long films based loosely on the Ten Commandments. At around the same time, the gentlemen came up with ideas for a more international appeal, the main result being the Three Colours trilogy. Of course, the films became classics with how much complex and truly real concepts went into them, but Kieślowski found it hard having made a truly international film. Quoting him, "I always thought of myself as a director of small, provincial films, which wouldn't find their way out of Poland. For a long time, I had thought this because they deal with Polish issues. But then it turned out that the things you can show in Poland, and were presumably connected with Poland, had a universal quality. It turns out that people who have no connection to Poland can still identify with these films and connect with them." This is how you start a trilogy. I had no expectations whatsoever going into this trilogy. All I knew was that they were French films, classics, dramas, and very visually interesting. And after this one, I was already hooked. Shit, I was hooked in like the first 5 minutes. Now, the overall filmmaking of this film is just my vibe. Y'all know me by now. I love that artsy, experimental, lucid, dreamy type of stuff, and this film elevates that sort of scheme to another level with how this film is so grounded. This film is just a drama, yet throughout its runtime, which is greatly paced and contains so much and excels it all in just an hour, FYI, knows how to create such an atmosphere. We get truly involved in the world of Julie, feeling like life itself is nothing but just a great imagination, everything feeling so distinct and life-filled. Just the overall production is splendid. Every location feels so lived in, everything feels so grounded, real, yet so otherworldly about it. You know your film has a truly distinct style when I can't even find the proper terms to describe it. This applies to the gorgeous cinematography that truly frames the narrative at hand somehow perfectly to emulating a person's perspective. This film is seen entirely through Julie's eyes and what we perceive. Everything from the filmmaking tackles this and really capturing her mindset through the lighting, colors, and overall framing. This is foreign filmmaking at its damn finest. I also think the cast of characters we have are generally great. From the supporting cast, everybody truly has their part to play in Julie's narrative, serving different roles and really portraying their parts just right, and adding such a layer of humanism to their atmosphere without being given so much depth that is great. But particularly our protagonist Julie, portrayed by Juliette Binoche, who truly embodies her performance. The way she can act without any dialogue and just mentally feed us her swirling of emotions is truly perfection. With so much psychological depth and a wider scope to her characterization being excellently conveyed. She's not a bad person, but nor a good person. She's just a human being who just endured a tragic event and is simply trying to do what any of us can do and move on. And she perfectly progresses the narrative all on her own. She's easily one of the most fascinating film protagonists I've ever tried to analyze. She's just a very neutral woman with so many mixed emotions and responses to the situations, and it's just great as the story at hand. It sometimes comes off as a singular soap opera narrative, but unlike any typical soap opera, its presentation, execution, and overall writing is much deeper and more complex, as well as being highly unpredictable the whole way through that made it enticing. It immediately hooked me in with its car crash, and the entire film is just as not depressing nor lighthearted, but just a very in-depth psychological analysis on her mindset of progressing her life past losing her husband and daughter, dealing with her past, and it's portrayed in such a way I've never seen this story been done before, with every single piece and beat flowing and perfectly putting everything together in such a spectacular way that is generally fantastic, and I would just desires for me to analyze it even further. I would detail what I examined, but it's best left towards the end. All in all, that ending made me not only satisfied with how the story concluded, but what's in store for White. Now this is how you continue a trilogy. Now off the bat, even though I prefer Blue overall, this movie still fucking slaps. Now generally it's all because of one minor flaw that makes it just weaker, so it's still a banger, so it's the story. Now don't get me wrong, I love this film's story, like the overall direction of it was incredible. This trilogy truly knows how to take familiar setups and go completely apeshit with it and run. But this one specifically can feel a little too simple, but it is highly engaging. Like if it weren't for the overall direction and it is containing that same three-color stylization, only now with a more real sense, it'd be basic. But anywho, negative out of the way, the movie still slaps. I do indeed love this story, and it was quite unexpected from the last one, as I was going in expecting another woman-led film, only for it to be this time the story being affected by a woman and centering around a man. I grew sympathetic towards protagonist Carol and his divorced and homeless status and trying to get his life together and get at his ex-wife. We all fear, and some of us have experienced, heartbreak, loneliness, and complete rock bottom. So I was already hooked in with the narrative. He's also just a completely opposite character to Julie. How he's very clumsy and flawed, but equally relatable and rootable. And his character is captivating to watch from start to finish, with his arc. Also, his supporting cast is incredible. Of course, my personal favorite, Mikolai, who's just a genuinely likable and fascinating character who starts off as a very noble man, just trying to help our fellow protagonist out. But when the reveal of him wanting to die occurs, I was generally in awe, and that plot point was easily my favorite across the film. Dominique is also just a fascinating antagonist, I suppose, as she's not entirely a monster, nor the purest of humans. She's just this character that hides across the film, whose impact really leaves us to both join Carol in wanting to get back at her, as all human desires we share in that kind of situation, but also want to understand her reaction to everything. The film has a more grounded look to it, compared to the colorfulness of Blue, but it's still fantastic in its framing and shot composition. The film also knows how to perfectly flow and really engage us in the story through this passage of time. As though we've seen the bottom to top narrative before, the way it progresses is truly unique. It manages to make time really slip by, yet feels so satisfying. Also, unlike Blue, this film has a more dramatic and soap opera feel to it than its predecessor, but it still is unique and original for going different directions you wouldn't expect, delivering both excitement and necessity. Also, generally just love how it takes place between Paris and Poland. Paris, which we become familiarized with in Blue, but Poland feeling truly like home as we've gotten adjusted to Carol's perspective. And that ending, fuck me. That ending is so good. A perfect bow tie on this truly dramatically fascinating picture, which leaves us to our final color. Now this is how you end a trilogy. This one right here is not easily the best of the trilogy. Not only a masterpiece on its own, but yeah, this deserves the label of one of the greatest movies ever made. This film is just a genuine banger and easily my favorite of the trilogy for taking what worked phenomenally with blue and white and combining it into its most greatest strength, whilst taking it with its own unique twist. In terms of its filmmaking, it's probably got the best in its department. The color grading may not be as colorful as blue, but it's made up for with its incredible dynamics, angles, framing, and creative wacky movement in a lot of its shots. It's amazing to watch this and how it truly enhances what's on display. The orchestra goes insanely hard in not only pure excellence, but meshing with the mood of every single scene. It never feels separated. It always syncs perfectly together in the moment. The way it flows is great too. Conveying sequences and providing the context of everything for later really makes it engrossing to watch. Unlike the other installments where white was dramatic and blue was psychological, this one inhales a very tragic and dramatic narrative but with a more heartfelt presence, combining the very best of all three films. The cast here is also easily the best, not just in how much heart they put into performances, but also in their character writing. Valentine is easily the best protagonist of the trilogy. She's the most likable, well-developed, and really rootable one, and the way she responds to the events of the film is great, alongside Joseph, who I believe is the best supporting character across the trilogy. Their bond is really what keeps the film going. Both are flawed, but both are the realest characters I think in the entire trilogy, and their dynamic both in writing and acting is generally genius, and easily holds up the film. The story, though, is where this film really shines. It has a very unique setup of listening in on neighbors' conversations and plays it up in a very Three Colours manner. How those actions not only reflect upon the characters psychologically, but also on all angles, and it's really riveting watching it all and how emotional and raw it all feels in execution. It's truly a film that, when analyzed further, really leaves quite the mark, and not only just a perfect way to cap off the trilogy after such dramatic events, but really end the trilogy on a high note. The Three Colours trilogy might possibly be my favorite movie trilogy of all time. Is it perfect? No. No movie is. It has its flaws, but its flaws are so damn tiny that it really is hard to even recognize them. These films are dramatic bangers. The way they can emotionally move you, grip you in with its colorful and vivid filmmaking, psychologically interesting dynamics and characters, and just powerful and well-rounded narratives that come together cohesively into one well-made trilogy makes it so special, creative, and masterful. If this is just the first trilogy we cover on here, we're really going on up from here. I hope you've checked these films out, and if you watch this video not caring about spoilers, I hope you go out of your way to watch them. They're true foreign treasures and just some great cinematic movie making for what it all truly means. The Three Colours are not just of a flag or of political ideas, but of everyday meaning, liberty, Julie's self-acceptance of freedom, equality, Carol and Dominique's shared pain, fraternity, Valentine and Joseph's uncommon bond. It's been Sunny. So long, farewell, and goodbye.